I mean, what we are seeing for the first time in this conflict, what we called combined arms maneuver warfare. And that sounds like a very sort of prescriptive title, but it's sort of what it says in the tin. It's the Western way of fighting. It's really what has been perfected using tanks and artillery and aircraft all together to achieve success. We have not seen combined arms maneuver in this war. You know, people at the very beginning of it, when the Russians with their tank columns steamed towards Kyiv, thought that that's what the Russians were going to do. But in order to do this successfully, it takes a hell of a lot of training and a hell of a lot of coordination. When I train my regiment, First Royal Tank Regiment, to do this sort of type of activity, it took us 2 years to get from the beginning to a point where we'd be successful. So that, to me, is the key thing. It has taken the Ukrainians a long time to train, have the right equipment to be able to achieve this sort of thing. So when it comes to timing, I think it has taken the Ukrainians 2 years or so to get to a position where they can confidently operate like this. And what we've seen is what we know there are maybe 10 to 15 tanks involved here, 20 or 30 infantry fighting vehicles, and about 1,000 soldiers. One of the key things is we don't really know, and that is absolutely key. Surprise. Everybody, all the sort of armchair academics and generals like myself who've been looking at this war, have coined a phrase, the transparent battlefield. The view was, with millions of drones around and all the other technology, you couldn't hide. Everything was seen. Well, that has actually absolutely been blown out of the water, because these 1,000 men in their vehicles have been training somewhere, as I'm suggesting, for months, if not a couple of years, and have got into a position without anybody seeing them, without the Russians seeing them, and without the Western media seeing them. So to me, that is pretty impressive. So timing, I think, is about training, but also it's about opportunity. I think you'll have noticed that over the last few weeks and months, an awful lot of the talk has been about Crimea. A lot of attacks have been into Crimea. And again, experts like me have been suggesting that Ukraine has been what we call preparing the battlefield. In other words, doing operations way behind the Russian front lines so that to disrupt their logistics supplies, disrupt their air forces, et cetera, et cetera. But all that we've been talking about is Crimea. So quite naturally, everybody believed that Crimea was the objective. And of course, the Black Sea Fleet has been defeated as well. But the main emphasis for the Russians has been in the Donbass, where they've concentrated forces and things have been very static. So this countermove, as I call it, up north of Kharkiv, the sort of northeast part of Ukraine, has caught everybody off guard, not least the Russians. So when it comes to timings, I think it's a combination of what again, the principles of war. You've got to seize success when you can, and then support that success. So as far as timings goes, that is my assessment of why it's happened. There will be a grand strategic plan with the generals and the security people, secret services, and I'm sure with advisors from the US and the UK and other NATO countries in Kyiv to try and shape the battle. Ultimately, Ukraine wants to get into a position where Russia has to come to the negotiation table with the potential of big losses. And I'm not talking manpower and machines and all the rest of it, because Russia has lost unbelievable amounts, but it's about territory, and I think this was an opportunity to seize territory because, there are a number of things I think it's meant to achieve. First of all, to redeploy forces. It is quite clear that the Russian forces in this area were, barely trained conscripts. They have been surrendering en masse. In fact, the only thing slowing down the Ukrainian advance is dealing with all these prisoners. The troops that were there to defend Russia have completely caved in. I think it's hugely significant as well that the civilians, you might expect a few civilians to pick up their plowshares and sickles and whatever else to try and defend Mother Russia. Well, that's absolutely not happened. Everybody has gone east very, very quickly.
Ображають.
Та в нас якби тут...
У нас просто там амуніція, не маємо куди, чесно.
Ну ладно, потихеньку тоді підемо.
Так, але ви українською говорите.
Так, я хоч і не українка, але по-українськи, так.
Так що...
Слава Україні!
This is a small tactical battle, but it's having a strategic impact. Putin is calling, cabinet meetings every other minute almost. And he, like Hitler, has got involved in minutiae. Putin is not a soldier. He was a spy. But he is getting right in there and telling soldiers on the front line how to do the job, a job he doesn't really understand, which I expect is making matters much worse. He is also no doubt telling his generals, get forces, get them up there to Kursk to block this gap. Well, as we know, it's a very static front line, despite the fact there's 600,000 Russian soldiers there. They're all conscripts, they're barely trained, they're very badly led, very poorly motivated. And as we've seen from this incursion, there is no mobile reserve. Now, in sort of maneuver warfare doctrine, you always need to have a reserve. It's the fundamentals of warfare. And you need a reserve that can get to places where it's needed. Now, Russia has obviously not done that. We're a week into this, and there has been no Russian countermove and no Russian force. There have been a few engagements, but for something that's so fundamental, and I think that is very, very apparent as well. So, in effect, Russia is going to have to move forces. There were rumors that 70,000 forces were being built up in the Donbass area, and also not too far away from here. They're going to have to be redeployed, but that ain't easy because these are basically just basic soldiers who know how to fire a rifle, not how to do maneuver. So I think that again is hugely significant. Of course, also the sort of the media and the propaganda and the disinformation. This time it's flowing massively Russia's way. Russia is almost seems to be caught on the hop. Even the mill bloggers and the people in Moscow who are always on the TV saying, what a disaster the West is and all the rest of it. They're silent. They appear to have lost their tongues, which is absolutely amazing. And I think also hugely significant is that people are, the rank and file in Russia are now hearing about this. Hitherto, Putin has told them, I'm the great military strategist, I can defeat everybody, you're absolutely safe. But, well, hang on now, we know that 80,000 civilians are charging eastwards because they're terrified of Ukraine. So an awful lot is happening, particularly at the strategic level. And it would appear that Ukraine has completely caught Russia off balance. In a sort of boxing analogy, has hit them hard where it hurts when they weren't looking. And it's becoming, it's an absolute challenge. And I think, so what? Well, it has shown that actually, the Russian war machine is very basic. Moscow is close enough to hear the shouts and screams of Kursk. And I think that is important. I think there's no desire of the Ukrainians to go, very much further. What they and what everybody wants is a swift conclusion to this. Now that the Ukrainians have proved that actually they can take Russian territory, I think we should soon be in a position where they can come to some sort of negotiation that satisfies both sides, which hitherto that they didn't. So as long as the shouts and screams are heard in Moscow, to me, that's operational success for Kyiv.